there. Welcome to another session. So great to see you. I see a lot of familiar names and some new ones as well. We have a good one for you today. No one wants to lose prospective clients to the firm down the street, right? Of course not, especially when those prospects have already contacted you. This is the lowest hanging fruit. The folks who contact your office and don't sign with you. Why? Why don't they sign with you, right? So we're certainly going to talk about the why today, but more importantly, we'll cover the solutions, kind of the simple fixes you can implement today to repair your intake process. And of course, sign more clients. And we're super excited about our guest today. She's an absolute pro in this area. Maddie Martin is the VP of Marketing at Smith.ai. Welcome, Maddie.
Thanks so much for having me, Kara.
Yeah, so we love partnering with Maddie and Smith.ai. Many of our Marketing Amplifier subscribers also use their services. They always provide spot on advice, so it works really well all around. And before I hand it off to Maddie, I want to mention, keep in mind, there will be a live Q&A session at the end. So feel free to submit your questions through the chat anytime throughout the session. We'll answer them on the fly or certainly get to them at the end. So submit those questions and we'll certainly get to them. So let's do it. Maddie, you ready?
I'm ready. And the only thing I'll say, Kara, is if you can interrupt me with any questions that come through that are relevant, please feel free. I can get back to where I left off, no problem. All right, so let's do the slideshow. There we go. Awesome. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. All right, wonderful. Well, as Kara mentioned, we are doing, the topic today, we're focusing on leaky lead funnels. So converting more conversations to clients in 5 steps with better intake. And there are a lot of things that go into intake. So I'm going to talk about calendaring. I'm going to talk about, workflows and integrations and things like that. Already covered my bio, VP of Marketing at Smith AI. If you aren't already aware, though, we do a lot more than call answering. So we are involved in calendaring and intake, in outreach campaigns, in website chat. So covering those channels that are most important to you and not just focusing on phone, because that's just one, and albeit the most important channel to most new leads. They say they prefer and expect to talk by phone most of the time. They also want to be, respected for the channel that they are reaching out on. So if someone texts you, if someone tries to chat, if someone can't find what they're looking for on your website or Facebook page, they're absolutely going to expect a conversation back in that same channel, right? Someone sends an email and you call them, they've sort of indicated that they want to be corresponded with on that first channel that they reach out to. So I will talk about a variety of channels today, and then the workflows that come out of those channels and where the leaks happen in the funnel, which relates really strongly to the funnels that are created by that first touch point. Kara already, explained who she is. Would you like to say anything else here?
Yeah, I mean, in case we haven't met, I'm Kara Pryor. I'm the president of James Publishing. I'm also the founder of our Marketing Amplifier system. It looks like I'm dressed very similarly today as I was in that photo, which is
yes, indeed.
that's classic. But many of you are familiar with our Marketing Amplifier program. It's really strongly focused on content and filling those marketing gaps with that content, and certainly with custom videos. So we'll kind of get into some of that in a bit, but I'll let Maddie take it away.
All right, wonderful. All right, so what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about intake systems and then pitfalls that limit the growth and the opportunity that exists within those systems. So how to identify faulty intake and then how to improve it with really accessible, easy fixes, components of the best intake systems, ways to better control and streamline your intake systems, and then the technology tools and talent that you need to implement in order to make the most of these systems and frankly, to not get caught up yourself in trying to run this entire system on your own. So I like to start here because oftentimes we think about intake and it's this really like technical, nerdy subject, and we don't really see it in real life. So if you just close your eyes for a second, like I can't see you, but you can see me, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to think back to when I had my babysitting money as like a 14-year-old and I would go get ice cream and, then some friend would bump into me, maybe a boy who thought he was funny. Maybe I would, start playing with a dog or maybe I would, swing around too fast because I'm a kid and I would drop my ice cream. And then wake up and like that's where you are right now thinking about your lead funnel. You've paid for something, you worked hard, you did your babysitting or your lawn mowing or whatever it is, you're lawyering now, and you get that ice cream cone, it's yours, you're about to take a bite and you don't get to. It falls on the floor, you wait too long and it melts. Like all of the time we have leaks in our lead funnel that look just like this very simple scenario where it's well within reach. It's probably in your grasp already, but you're not realizing that treat, that bonus, that benefit, that lead, because something else is coming in the way of it. You're not acting fast enough, and so on. So I just like this example because it's something that we can all relate to, and it's not super technical. It's not about integrations and fancy workflows. It's just about like, man, that seems really unfair that you paid for that thing that you worked hard for, you put your own money down, paid for marketing campaigns, you invested in technology, you invested in content, in a staff, in an intake specialist. But why aren't the leads coming through properly? Where are there still gaps? Well, it's not actually that hard to identify where they exist, especially if we think about what's, facing the average law firm owner, right? So if we think about what consumers expect, these are your clients. Some people call them customers. These are leads, potential new clients, right? They're expecting an immediate response, no matter what the channel, no matter how available you are, no matter how flashy the button is on your website, they're expecting an immediate response. They don't care how you monitor it, right? They don't care what your staff looks like. So that's the reality. And it's no surprise that 50% of lead gen budgets get wasted on leads who are never contacted. The 80%, 79% of marketing leads never convert into sales because these people are not getting contacted. What we see is that 2 out of every 3 potential clients is basing their decision to hire a law firm on their initial responsiveness to that first call or email, text, Facebook message, TikTok message, wherever you are, wherever your brand has a profile online. The most important thing that you could do for your growth is to be responsive there and then reasonably carry that conversation through to the next step, which is typically, screening, qualifying, and booking the appointment. Now, why are we not answering the phone? Well, we're busy. We have, been through 2 years of a pandemic. The kids are at home. The parents who are elderly and need support are at home. We have people who are cooped up. They're distracted. Their minds are a little bit fuzzy and foggy with all the things that are going on. Meanwhile, we've got spam calls that continue to inundate us. I don't care how many updates my iPhone has. I still get inundated by them. And as a result, we're not answering those calls. And then when we have the opportunity to call that new lead back and we're sort of ticked off because they're not picking up, well, it's the same reason that you didn't pick up, because it's an unknown number. You're not yet a client. And why should they pick up? Even if it's in the same area code, we all know that the spoofing happens with calls within your own area code. So incoming calls are not answered even 50% of the time, right? And it takes so many repeated attempts to actually get through, which we'll talk about later. So if we look at these conversion rates and we think, okay, well, at the very top of the funnel, so to speak, and I'll show you the funnel in a second, at the very top line where people are just reaching out, they expect immediate responsiveness. And if you don't get that immediate response, picking up the phone right away, you or someone who you've delegated that to, you have a really low likelihood of ever getting in touch with that person because it's just too long of a delay and then very little follow-up that happens, which we see in the data. Most people only reach out once. They don't reach out 5, 6, 7 times that's required, right? So it's also something to consider that when we even do get in touch with these leads, they're consulting with business, with a law firm that they didn't hire, right? So there's a lot of people who are, and I'm sure there's plenty, put a one in the chat if you've ever had this happen. I mean, you have clients who say, I know what you do, I need your services, and then they're absolutely just consulting you to get what they think is going to be free legal advice, or they're just, kicking tires, so to speak, trying to figure out, oh, can I do this on my own? Or did the other quote that I get compare to yours? And they're not really sincere and they're not going to hire you. And how do you figure out who's actually going to waste your time or who's actually worth that consultation? Because even if you charge for consultations, you're not in the consultation business. Typically, correct me if I'm wrong, but most people are not in the consultation business. It doesn't say consultation firm, it says law firm, right? So yeah, you can charge for it. That can be a good way to offset the cost of some of the leads who don't end up coming through, as insofar as that's relevant for your practice area, of course, but it's not a mechanism that solves the problem. It soothes the problem where it can be soothed, but it doesn't solve it. You're not a consulting firm, right? So how do customers come in? How do clients come in? And where are we seeing the estimate or quote, forgive some of the language here, where do we see the biggest drop-off points? If this is the funnel, what we're focusing on today, just because we could run an entire college course on this, the qualified leads at the top, those are people who are visiting your website, coming to your Facebook page. They might be referrals, they might be organic search, they might be someone who's completely, in the wrong place. We need to figure out who's in the right place. Are they qualified leads? Do they have the right timing and budget and expectations, location, all of these things that, can you do it? Can you do it now? Can you do it for the price that they're willing to pay, et cetera? And then have they moved on to the next stage where they are scheduling an appointment, scheduling a consultation, they've completed that new intake form, and you have a pretty good sense that they are going to move forward if you can just get that first call with them, right? So when we think about the opportunities, being sort of the opportunities and consultations is where we're going to stop the conversation today on the leaky lead funnel, because frankly, once they get on your calendar, you have a pretty good sense that your conversion rate is well within your control. That's not something that Smith AI is going to be super involved in, or James Publishing is going to be super involved in. Maybe for retention, maybe for reviews, maybe for some outreach and client engagement. But really, for the purpose of this presentation, we're just thinking about how can we optimize the first few stages before they get in touch with you, so the best people get in touch with you, and as many of them who are out there as possible who are aware of you get in touch with you, right? So we're not thinking about how do we drive awareness. We're not thinking about how do we close on the phone. Those are two different conversations. We're thinking, once we have awareness, how do we get them to take action and get in touch with you and be worth your time? Right. So this is a great exercise to think about. And there's actually, and I'll share this deck with you, an example on this slide where you can complete this yourself. We have some conversion metrics that are just samples. Let's say that it costs you $5,000 to drive 1,000 website visitors. And out of those 1,000, you're going to go all the way down the funnel. You've got 80 leads, you've got 40 qualified opportunities, 20 consultations, 10 retained clients. Okay, so 50% conversion rate from a quality consultation, not unheard of, certainly reasonable. It might even be higher in your case, depending on how many of your clients are referrals versus lead gen. You might be paying for leads. You might be in business networking groups. Those can be pretty strong. If you've got a profile on Avo, you might find that some of those consultations, if you're not screening them properly, are not going to convert. So as long as you're qualifying your opportunities properly, those consultations converting to clients at 50% or greater is totally reasonable. And then if we've got, let's say on average, low ballpark, $2,000 per client, 20,000, if you're making more than that, the profit margin is even greater. You have more to spend on your overhead, your marketing. Where do you reinvest your profits, and what other costs might you have? Again, that's a conversation for another time. But when we just look at this super simple model, what can we control? So can we get more leads out of the 1,000 visitors? Well, maybe, as long as 1,000 visitors are quality traffic. Let's say they're coming from organic search, from referrals, from hearing about you in the past and looking you up now because they're ready to hire. Great. So we have a pretty good sense that most people are leaving leads on the table when people come to their website because there's not a clear call to action. We did a fantastic copywriting class on your website, by the way, that I will share a link to from YouTube, where we were talking about how do you change your homepage copy and your call to action with a contrasting color to really pop so that people see there's an action to take. They don't have to hunt around for it. Maybe there's website chat to increase engagement, to get people's information, and not just have a search bar where they can, look and find all the information, but never tell us who they are, right? So chat is very functional for that, and I'll talk about that later. If we have more leads who are coming through, more leads who are clicking that button and giving basic information, more people who are chatting in, more people who are calling because your phone number is big and splashy and bright orange on your website. Can tell I like orange. That's really the opportunity to say, how can I make it very obvious that I'm accepting new clients, that I do A, B, and C, or just A, or just B, and put it in language that someone can understand from a third grader's perspective. I'm sure Cara can talk about this plenty, but you don't want to have a college degree to read your website, right? So can you make it faster and easier to understand what you do? Can you provide the tools and the calls to action and the, apparent, design that allows you to capture those leads? Yes. So I think we can get more out of those visitors than you already have. Then you've got the qualified opportunities. And we're thinking, well, if we can get more leads, then we'll naturally, at the same conversion rate, have more qualified opportunities. But can we tune that up a little bit too? Yes, you can make sure that your questions, your screening questions, are effective, that they are focused, that they're not overly burdensome. You don't have people bailing out on that conversation, that they're able to get through a few simple questions, and that they reflect the clients that you want today. So if you're using a stale intake form, if you have to tell people, skip over that question, it's not relevant anymore. If you're just trying to jot things down as they occur to you and you might forget certain questions, then that's a lack of a system that we'll address. Just using the same process every time and revisiting it to make sure that it is relevant is one of the easiest things that you can do to make sure that your intake is proper before you get a consultation. And you can actually combine in many ways the intake and the consultation, which I will show you really briefly, just as one interlude early on. If I go to, I'm gonna actually refresh this page. So I don't know, some of you might know Joey Vitale at Indy Law, and he's got this landing page here that comes from his main website, which is Indy Law. And, if I'm a new lead, I'm a business owner, I want to, make sure my trademarks are all set. We just had him on a webinar of ours recently. I've got this Calendly link that pops up, and then I click on, sure, I want to talk to you on Monday at 9 a.m. Here's my information. Here's my phone number, my website, and then, whoa, what are all these other questions, right? This is basically an intake form. And if you think, well, that doesn't apply to me, I guarantee you that it applies to you. You're not asking, protected information. You're not asking for super private, details. You're simply asking, what's your time frame? Is this in your budget? Because package prices begin at $1,500. Are you prepared to spend that, right? How soon are you looking to start? If someone's coming in and saying, I have a family matter that I need to resolve, I have an estate matter, a divorce matter, I have a separation, child custody, immigration, you name it. How soon are you looking to resolve this, or do you need to resolve it? Do you have a court date scheduled? And we'll talk about some examples specifically later, but I just want to show you for a moment in real life that this is an active form that someone is using, Joey, and it is extremely detailed, not cumbersome. I just have to one flick of my mouse and I can scroll to the end. I don't have to scroll forever. And there are some things that are optional too, right? Like, is there anything that we didn't ask that you want to make sure we cover? Now, this is in direct contrast to what we typically see, and I'm not going to give an example. I don't want to call anybody out. where it's name, phone number, email, and then a big blank box that says, tell us why you want to contact our law firm. And that's really problematic because you end up getting a whole lot of stuff if you're lucky, but not that I've seen a whole lot of minimum word counts on there, but you're not necessarily getting the data that you need. And who knows what you need? Not the client, you know what you need. So taking more of that control and saying, I'm going to steer this conversation the same way that I'm going to be, if I take on this client, obliged to work with them in the methods that I deem appropriate. That's where you want to start that conversation. You don't want to start the conversation where they have complete control over what they tell you and what they don't tell you, right? So guide that and structure it. And then one really interesting thing here is Joey's actually asking a lot more information than most. He has 2 questions about how did you hear about us? Have you seen our Facebook ads? That's really pro. I would say at the very least, make sure that you are asking, how did you hear about us? Some people choose to have drop downs, online search, Facebook, Twitter. There might be some core channels where you're operating, YouTube. You might have TV commercials or bus ads, whatever it is. If you give those drop downs, less chance that you're going to have trouble, consolidating that data later. But if you have a lot of referrals, you always want to have an open box that says, write in the name if it was a referral, et cetera. So a lot of best practices that we can see here in Joey's form. And I'm going to go back to my, trusty presentation. All right, so we talked about qualification a little bit, and this is just to set the scene of how important it is to take a really detailed approach to every stage of your intake process. And again, you will be able to use that worksheet yourself. So the first thing that I'm not surprised, you won't be surprised for me to mention is obviously your phone systems. One of the most important things is that people do not audit their phone systems from the get-go. Like after this webinar, if you do nothing else, make sure that you call your business phone from your cell phone or have someone else call you and make sure that it comes through correctly, that it is answered professionally, immediately. You should always have coverage, especially during the daytime hours, but 24/7 is really important. We see as many as 25% of leads come through either through phone or chat, text after hours. And especially now with COVID, people are really spread thin throughout the day. And they might only have time, at the end of the day when the kids are asleep to have conversations about legal matters, right? It might not be even appropriate to talk about them in front of the other members of the household. So just be really thoughtful that it does require auditing every so often. And I would have a friend help you with this. Maybe there's a buddy on the call today. You could say, hey, can you call my business number and I'll call yours, and count the rings. So if you're hearing 4, 5, 6, 7 rings when you're calling your friend and your friend says, I picked up as soon as I heard the first ring, you've got a latency issue, right? And we have a blog post about that too. Which I will, I'm going to put that in the chat right now so you've got it and I don't forget. But there's a great article by Graham Nelson Sutter, who runs a VoIP provider, Corvum, which integrates with legal solutions like Clio. And what they found is they have a simple template for reaching out to your phone system. You don't have to switch. You don't have to make, massive changes necessarily. You can just ask, hey, phone system where I'm paying you money, VoIP provider, can you fix this for me? I identify there are delays. There are some like, I think 8x8 and Vonage that you might hear 7, 8 rings before you even hear the first, right? If you're the lead calling, you're going to hang up when you hear 7, 8 rings before someone answers. So be very careful there. Also be very mindful that if you are getting calls to your office and then forwarding them to a receptionist service, or if you have CallRail or what converts for call tracking added into your system, then you want to be mindful of the rings. You can have a couple rings, but you can't have 6, 7 rings. So are you using that data from CallRail, from what converts? If you are, great. If you're not, don't cost yourself that ring, because every ring is the potential for someone to hang up, right? So make sure calls are forwarded. If you can forward calls immediately without delay, great. If you want to have a little bit of a gap where you have the opportunity to answer and then you forward to a service like Smith AI, you can totally do that. Just be really mindful of what that trade-off is. Now, with phone systems, there's not just the potential for ring delays, which can be controlled, and it's just something to monitor every so often. You also want to be mindful that when you're choosing solutions like Google Voice, which I know they now have support, but it's not really the same support that you're going to get when you work with a proper phone provider, like a Dialpad or a phone.com, or someone who really has proper professionals and available to you as a small business owner. Really think about what you're paying for. So if you're getting a free Google Voice account, it does have limited functionality. It does have very, very limited support. What is that going to cost you in the long run to deal with that headache or issues with that phone system when other solutions are $25 a month, maybe $50? Those are things that you want to be investing in up front at the very top of the funnel. Those phone calls that are coming in, that's something you don't mess with, right? You can mess with your intake forms. You can try a different one every week, but you don't mess with your phone system because that's something that is precious and right up front for you. All right, so let's talk about the intake form and process. I mentioned a few things when I discussed Joey's example, and I think that we can see that it's going to be very different depending on the type of practice area that you're in, and you might have a different form for each different practice area, or you might combine different drop-down menus for multi-practice area firms if you can segment it that way. So think about, all right, I don't just need contact information so I can get back in touch with this person, because not everyone is a one-call close, so to speak, and you're not always available to take this call. And someone doing intake for you is going to provide a lot of documentation, and then you're going to say, okay, well, I've got a meeting later, or they didn't show up to the meeting because people are busy and they just flake out. I need to call them back. You need to be able to get back in touch with them, and not just by phone. You want to be able to leverage multiple channels. You might even ask for, if they give you an office phone, if they give you like a home phone, if people still have home phones, ask for their mobile number so you know that it's textable. I'm making that a word. So what are the case details, as in, like, is there anyone else who is involved in this case? If you have to do conflict checks, what are the names of other parties, financial details, and payment preferences? So is there anything that would prevent you from paying online? Like, do they have a credit card? They should hopefully have a credit card. That might make things difficult later on. Are they familiar with, the tools that you're going to require for your tech savvy law firm for them to be a client? Actually, it's important to think about that up front, and your thoughtfulness will rub off on them. Think about, what are their expectations on not just how much it's going to cost. You don't have to tell them how much it's going to cost. You might not know how much it's going to cost. Maybe your flat fee and you do, maybe your subscription. A lot of people don't necessarily, especially in the legal field, want to disclose a cost or even a range. Fine, but at least say, what do you expect this to cost, or what have you budgeted? And if you go beyond budget, is there someone who's going to be able to help you with this, just to have them thinking about, with sincerity, involving you and taking up your time, right? So if it's not the right time, then revisit that later. You can add them to your newsletter. You can, if you have an immigration newsletter, you probably have stories from your clients. You have, breaking news, things that are helpful to them until they're ready, or maybe they need to go work with family to get the available funds. You might even work with a firm or other scheduling solutions that allow people to spread out payments. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's important to know upfront how much time you're going to invest in this, and when do they expect this to be over. So let's say resolved or starting to be handled, right? So if they have a court date scheduled for tomorrow, that's going to be very troublesome to handle their case. If they have a court date scheduled next week, what does that mean? What do you tell the person who is handling your phone calls to do in that scenario, right? Is there a threshold that you can handle? So not just, is there a court date scheduled, but when is it scheduled? If so, and how does that lead you down a certain workflow? Internally, you're going to be, logging what you think the case value is, you always are asking for the source. How did you hear about us? And as I mentioned, if there's anything related to conflict checks, service areas, are they in the right state and location? Are they in the right practice area? Obviously, that would be covered in the case details section. So think about and use this worksheet to identify either what you need your intake form to look like, or some areas that you're neglecting in your current intake form. And the best way, honestly, to do this, because so many of these are online already, is to go see what your competitors are doing, what people you admire are doing, people in your Facebook groups, they have their law firms on their profile page. Go look at what they're doing, because it is absolutely critical that you get a good idea of the lay of the land and get inspired by, some things that other people are doing that might be relevant for you. How do they phrase it? What is the tone? How are they suggesting it be completed? And that's really helpful to make sure that this is carried out. If you use words that are not as easily understood by that person who's completing the form, which you might post on your website, you're going to find yourself not having so much success with people completing these, but landing on the page. If there's no chat, no phone number, they're just going to bounce and they'll go find another form that's just more easy to understand. It's not that they don't want to fill out a form at all. So think about, in terms of the lead conversion flow, the sources that are coming through. This is sort of the funnel, but turned on its side, right? You've got sources on the left. You've got different contact methods. You've got someone who is an intake specialist. I say technician or sales rep to mean like, who's that more savvy, person who's not necessarily the law firm owner, operator, founder, assistant, receptionist service, some automation, maybe in the way of a chatbot. There are a lot of different ways to get responses out. And it might be someone who is a closer, so to speak. It might be someone who is just an assistant. Is it always going to be the attorney? No, that's where that consult happens. The consult doesn't need to be commingled with that first call. There can be some separation there. You can also have a warm transfer, so you don't have to have a delay, but you don't have to be available as the attorney on that first call. Then we think, okay, well, we've asked the questions on intake. We know who's a good lead and who's a bad lead, right? And then you're going to refer those out to other firms that are better suited to handling those leads, different practice area, outside of the service area, outside of the state, whatever. It's not the right timing. They have an urgent need that you can't handle, but maybe your other friend can, etc. Then we think about, all right, well, how much is this case worth to me? And when can we get this scheduled for a consult? And hopefully, after you have this engagement, then you feel like, all right, well, I'm in a good position to win this new client. Maybe I have to do a little nurturing and follow up, because not everyone is as hungry for business as I am. They might have other things going on in their life. It doesn't mean that they're not sincere if they don't close right away. You need to still work at it. The work's not over. So there might be email drips, follow-up content that you're sharing, testimonials, etc. Obviously, Cara knows a lot about this, where you can actually get that new client, maybe not immediately, it's always the hope, but very shortly thereafter, where you're focusing your attention. I'll talk about this in a second. You're focusing your attention on those potential clients, closing, and understanding over time, how many touches does that actually take? Because if we look here, we can see there's already a lot of touches that have happened. If you stop, at the intake form or at the, consultation, well, so many steps have already happened. Someone's visited, they've chatted in, they've read something on your website, they've talked to the receptionist, you've run the conflict check, then you have the meeting, etc. There's a lot of steps already. Why people stop before the close, it just boggles my mind. There's been so much work that maybe you haven't directly been individually, incrementally involved in, but it doesn't make sense to stop now. You're already got the ball in your hand and you're running towards the end zone, and you're just I'm tired, I'm winded, I'm just going to take a break. There's no one else who's carrying that ball at the end zone, right? So make sure that you don't drop the ball at the last moment, because it's really critical. And that's why we'll talk about the extent of what happens before you actually get to, close a new client. The most critical thing is the follow-up and the access points that you have. So we talked about the intake forms, and I want to give some examples here, and I'm going to use some non-legal examples because I think that this is actually more interesting in some ways than just looking at, some of the other legal examples that I have. I have those too, not to worry. If you look at what the flooring industry is doing, what the home services industry is doing, which, by the way, they're booming like crazy during COVID. People are sitting in their home office and they're staring at their floors all day long. They're eating, cooking more than they ever have, looking at their kitchens, remodeling those. They're experiencing, that their roof isn't in such good shape, their backyard isn't draining well, whatever. A lot of home services. So this is an industry that has it really, really well dialed in because they have so much demand, right? So that breeds efficiency. If we think, well, how are these folks getting quotes? They do estimates, they do consults. They're very thoughtful about how much time they're allocating to different jobs based on the value, right? So it's very similar to the law firm workflows that we see, where you have an initial intake, which is screening questions. How big is the job? Is it commercial or residential? You might think, am I B2B or B2C? Do I work with individuals or do I work with businesses? How far out am I willing to drive or work or wherever the courthouse is? And what type of work is this? Approximately what project size? Now here they're asking for square footage. You might ask for how many other people are involved for an estate matter, or how long it's been going on, or how much budget you have set aside, et cetera, et cetera. The size of the project is something that you can approximate with some questions. And then when do you anticipate the start date? Well, you might ask about court dates. You might ask about your expected time to start, because someone might say, I'm on vacation for 2 months and I want to get this going afterwards. It's not the most important thing, but it was on my mind today. That does happen quite a bit. So what can we take from this? We can take that obviously they're asking only the most important things up front. This is not a 20 question form. These are really substantial jobs where their time is precious. If they don't have to ask 20 questions, then often neither does an attorney, right? So I think this is a great example to say, look, we're getting some comments. If we didn't cover it, fine. But we know we need to be able to reach you. We need to know if we can do the job in your area and if it's reasonable for our particular business to do this job. And anything else might be noise. So if we look at Emily Cooper, her firm has family law, Social Security, disability. If we look at what is your legal issue on the right, and is there a court hearing scheduled in your case? Again, I mentioned you want to ask for the date, not just a yes or no question. If there is a court hearing scheduled, when is it? Pick from this date selector. We're getting the contact information. We're getting how did you hear about us, actually really upfront, right after the contact info. And Joey did something very similar. And then some of these details. And you know what? There's something really interesting that happens here when you don't ask upfront. Oh, pick your practice area. Tell me what's ailing you. Tell me what the matter is. You're easing them in by saying, you know what? Let's start slow. You know your name, you know your address, you know your phone number and your email. Let's just get those out of the way. Good. You're in your groove, like typing that in. Cool. Now, how did you hear about us? Pretty easy question. Now, what's your legal issue? And there's something interesting mentally that happens here where it's like you just keep going with the flow and then you're into the harder questions before you realize it. And if we don't be mindful and think, are these hard questions? For some people, they are. It probably took them a lot to go ahead and reach out to a law firm. So allow them to sort of get into that mindset. And then when they've answered your questions, you can offer them a consultation. You can offer them, I'll talk about the freebies in a second. You can offer them, a free or paid consultation and think about what that means for your growth model. So when we talk about leaky lead funnels, I think it's really important to also talk about what your goals are, right? Like when we looked at that model earlier, we're thinking like, can we squeeze more juice from this orange without spending any more money on marketing necessarily? How much can we get out of this? And then we can go and spend more money on marketing because we have things really dialed in. What often happens is in an audience like this one, there are a lot of different stage law firms. There are some that are brand new. There are some that have been operating for a long time. And, often we start talking about, 15-minute free consultation, 30-minute paid consultation. It brings us back to the matter at hand, which is a leaky lead funnel is only leaky if it's leaking out things that you want. Something that is leaking out things that you don't want, like you're straining pasta and you just want to keep the pasta and you don't want the pasta water, I wouldn't call that a leaky lead funnel, right? That's why I give you the ice cream example and not that strainer example, because I don't want the pasta water. That's to be discarded, right? So not to be harsh, but if you have a law firm that is running really smoothly, that has a lot of demand, and you want to refine your intake to focus your time on the best, most valuable, most lucrative clients who you can serve uniquely well, then you can be more picky. And your leaky lead funnel are people who are maybe coming in and wasting your time, and they're taking consultations from people who would be a better fit, who would be higher paying or more interesting or a better, alignment to your firm. And that's where the leak is happening. If you are, and this often happens, a small firm that's just starting out and your demand isn't yet what you want it to be, then your leak is not responding fast enough, not engaging fast enough, not following up enough, because you want to book more appointments, and it's not so much a quality matter. It's more like you need to be busier and you're too slow to get back in touch with them and you're losing leads up front, right? So think about what best describes you. And if you have leads who you need to funnel out, then you need to think more about intake and how to make that more rigorous. If you have leads that you can't miss, then you need to think about how to be extremely responsive and capture upfront all of that lead information as you possibly can. You want that clear call to action on your website. Yeah, go ahead, Cara.
Yeah. A couple good questions here, Maddie, super relevant. So Sandra asked, what do you do with lazy users or those who don't want to complete a long form?
I would first give them the benefit of the doubt and try and get on the phone with them and see if you can just be their scribe. We do this all the time, for our law firm clients, capture that information by phone and say, I understand people have arthritis, people have crappy, internet connections. They have, all of these different things, to try and get that information in a form can be uncomfortable or very difficult for people. So first, give them the benefit of the doubt. And two, if they can't do that, if they're not even willing to work with your, kindness, then they're probably not the right fit, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And then quick from Melinda, just asked, should calls be answered right away at the first ring or get it at the second, third ring?
So I would try I've got a little asterisk here. So you want to be as responsive as possible. Like when you get a web form, you want to call that form back within a minute, actually, or it goes down by like 400% if you wait 5 minutes. They've already gone to the other business. If you have an incoming call, you want to answer as fast as possible. But if you find a lot of value in tools like CallRail or call recording tools that might need to, read something like a whisper message that says, this call is going to be recorded, or this is on a recorded line, or you have CallRail, which takes a ring to forward to Smith AI and capture that information from where they found that phone number, it might be worth it to you to wait one ring. So as long as you're picking up within 3 rings, it's really fine. It's very unlikely that someone's going to hang up after just 3 rings. When you start to get to 5 or 6, then you're in, problem territory.
That makes sense. Good. Okay. That's all we had for now.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah. And just think about what's a required field versus not required field, right? How you heard about us, like, yes, it should be required. Certain things like your apartment isn't required. Like not everyone has an apartment, right? There's some other examples here that I think are helpful from a lead attraction standpoint. So if you're having trouble attracting enough leads or engaging them on your website to show value up front, one of the things that you can do is also say like a checklist for how to know if you're ready for a separation, or how to set yourself up properly for child custody, or what the latest rules are for immigration for people who are in, I don't know, college already, you know, they have a visa, whatever the case may be. They've married someone, they've gotten divorced. There's so many articles, and then also assets that you can create from the content that you probably have on your blog. So if you have 10 blog posts about, you know, how to budget for a divorce as a soon to be single woman, you can make a checklist that says, have you checked these things off in your preparation to be divorced? Which I would have appreciated in my 20s. And then you think about like, okay, is this something that I can actually put on Facebook? I can make it a downloadable resource. Like these are all things that also attract leads, but they may even tell you a little bit more about your leads before you do that intake. So if you think about your marketing channel, what you're using to attract your leads, was it a specific blog post? Was it specific ad copy? Was it a YouTube video in particular? What was the content of that? And how does that tell you about the intention of these leads, right? So I don't see a ton of this with legal. I'm again using this example from home services because I think they lay it out really clearly. A lot of these are estimators, but it's just to get your brain working and saying, you know what, if they're participating in these sort of activities or downloading a checklist, they're probably more qualified than just some random website visitor. Another example from legal, Tri-City Legal, I've talked about this a lot in the past. They have taken forms from basically the state, from the municipality for tenant eviction, for example, and they put this on their website. They made it really digestible. And if someone fills out the form on their website, they complete the PDF, they email it to the client, and they say, here you go, you want to do it yourself. Now they're going to check in with them every few days based on when the notice delay is, and say, how's that going with that tenant? Did you end up evicting them? Do you need our help? If they need an attorney's help, if they are going to hire an attorney at all, you better believe it's going to be this firm, right? They owe them. They already did them a solid. So think about how you can create assets like this upfront for recurring use, and then not worry so much about the intake later on. When they're hungry, you already have this information. You don't need to do necessarily another intake. You've gotten it up front, and that's why you're already reaching back out to them, right? So when it comes to your calendar, we saw a couple examples for, you know, Joey and others. First, the intake form, then the calendar. Now that works for the first stage. You want to make sure that the calendaring tool is also maybe in your email signature. Stamp is a fantastic resource that offers a free solution that makes signatures look great for clients and for leads who you might be emailing back and forth. Your staff might be emailing back and forth. If you need to, you know, get group meetings together, Doodle and actually Calendly just launched group meetings about a month or so ago. And then you can embed times for easy click through into your email system as well. So not so much back and forth, not are you available when and at what time zone. If you're like me, you operate in multiple time zones with your team across the country, with clients. If you're working in trademarks, that often happens. Just think, how can I eliminate the back and forth? Because that's going to speed up your lead funnel. The more emails back and forth, the greater the chance that someone's just going to stop emailing because it just got lost in the flow. Someone else made it easier. The person who makes it the easiest is often going to be the person who gets the client, right? Fast and easy. Now, I have this little worksheet here to think about. How are you going to share your calendar? Where are you going to share your calendar? Also think about, like, what are the placements where you can share it? Is there a place for this on your Facebook page? Is there a place for this on your website to have a booking link that has the intake form embedded in it, like Joey did? Is there a place for this on every YouTube video on your end screen? Book a consultation. Is it in the description? Think about every single place where a new lead would want to reach you. And maybe for clients, that's the thing that goes in your email signature as well. What we find is that people are reluctant to share their calendar because they think that it opens them up to anything and everything at every time. which it doesn't. So a tool like Calendly will actually allow you to block out your availability for a tool like Calendly to be used on top of your existing calendar. And if I'm really my best at consults in the morning, or I only take consults in the afternoon, or I'm going to open up, Calendly to my whole day, and it's going to work around my existing events. And if someone wants to book time with me, they can do so between 2 and 2:15 today. But other than that, I'm blocked. Keep that in mind. And then also make sure that you have enough availability. If you say, Calendly, I'm only available in the mornings, and then you are in court every morning, Calendly's got the wrong information. So just open it up, make sure that your calendar is up to date, and Calendly will work around that. And anyone who uses it will only see your available times, just like we did with Joey, right? I don't get to see what he's doing. He doesn't see what I'm doing, but I can see, what? He's got availability at 2 p.m. tomorrow, and so do I. So I'm going to book that time. And that's the way that it works for any receptionist service as well. We just see when you're available. Now, you might even have callbacks for 15-minute callbacks instead of a 45-minute consultation. Those can be available as well. You can have client check-in meetings that can be available as well. You might have people who you're not quite sure if they are qualified based on their intake. It might be a little fuzzy. You might say, look, if they don't answer these questions or they're hurrying to get off the phone, schedule them for a 15-minute callback instead of the full consultation. So I'm not blocked for an hour on my calendar. I'm only blocked for 15 minutes, right? So there are some ways to at least ease into this so you're comfortable and you're not putting, hour-long blocks on your calendar, especially if you're new to delegating things. Okay, this is one of my favorite slides. So follow-up. It is absolutely critical that you follow up more than once. And if you look at this curve, the whole point of this is, where is the plateau? The plateau doesn't start to happen until at least the 6th call, right? And what that means is that if we have the leads who are converting, only 48% of them convert on the first call. 93% of them convert by the 6th call. And after that, there's sort of diminishing returns because it's a cost to have multiple attempts and follow-up, et cetera. You might find that the cost is not outweighed by the benefit. But what we see here is there's a very steep line from 48% to 70%, and another big gain each step until we get to about the 6th call. But there's only a 1 or 2 point increment after that, where it really might be more costly for outreach than it is to gain the whatever potential client is still there. So do not give up. And this is another reason why a service like Smith AI, and also great content that's being sent by email interspersed with that, can be really good at converting your leads. It's not just phone outreach. It's a text follow-up. It's that email from the client testimonial that says, here's who we recently served. So 6 calls, but what else is happening in the meantime? And the only thing I encourage is that you think about, what do your clients expect and what is their time frame when you set this cadence in motion. So you could do 6 call attempts in one day, and I would probably want to smack you. And then you could do 6 call attempts in a year, and you would be way too late on the second attempt, right? So if you've got matters of personal injury, criminal defense, you're going to be picking up right away. You're going to be following up pretty rapidly because that's something that's extremely time sensitive. And that might also be the case in family matters with high net worth estate planning and things that are very clearly not urgent. Then, not that those always are, but in the case that it is, you might space it out a little bit more, make sure that it feels like you are a trusted advisor and partner who's not going to pepper and annoy them. Whereas the person who has a personal injury or criminal defense matter might be annoyed if you don't reach out to them really often. So think about what is the expectation for your client and then how often those 6 calls need to happen. But those 6 calls are really the magic number there. And then just outline your follow-up process.
Just real quick, just because it's so relevant. So a question, 6 calls. So I think that was kind of the, maybe there was some surprise that it was that many, but look at those numbers. I mean, that's so compelling. I think that tells the story right there. So
Look at your gains. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question here is, do you use WhatsApp messages too? It was one of the questions, but.
So if you are in an immigration practice or working with an international business or international clients, absolutely. And if their family is going to be involved, if anyone is going to be working internationally, I mean, WhatsApp, if anyone has ever used it, is really pretty easy and nice to use, but it also feels like, you know, it can inundate you or someone starts texting you. I would use it in conjunction with calls and just see, you know, what actually ends up converting better. So keep track of your data. If you're sending a booking link for a Calendly or some similar tool via WhatsApp, that's totally fine. They can open that, you know, window on their screen on their mobile phone and book an appointment. You know, your phone is just your mini computer these days. So there's no harm in using messaging apps of any kind. You can use Facebook Messenger. If you are connected on Facebook, if you're connected on WhatsApp, use that channel because that's probably the most reliable, least noisy way to reach them. Think about how much is in an email versus how much volume is in WhatsApp. I mean, unless they're Kim Kardashian, their WhatsApp or the Facebook messages are not going to be as busy as their email inbox, right? So I would definitely use the channel that they prefer as long as you're tolerant and can monitor that.
Yeah, that's great, Maddie. And it's, you know, I think what's so important about what you're saying too is, you know, putting this system in place so that there is this nice mix of calls and text messages and emails, and it doesn't feel like you're inundating these prospects because you are providing value. And you have to remember, these folks contacted you, right? I mean, it's not like you're cold calling and just, you know,
right.
reaching out, right? So it's important to remember that. And as long as you're providing value, you know, as you say in those emails, and really, you know, kind of convey your caring and keep them educated. They're not super salesy, right? That's important to remember. And, you know, it's the proof is in the numbers. So I think that's super helpful.
Totally.
Yeah. So we'll hold some of the other questions, but go ahead.
I'm just going to cruise through this. You heard me talk about chat. I know we only have a few minutes left. So I just want to say for chat, you have to try it before you deny it, right? So if you add it, we typically see 20 to 30% more leads magically, automatically coming to your business because they just were not being engaged. No one was saying, hey, do you need something? There's not a lot of search on websites. Most people don't have it. Where are they going to find the information that they need? Maybe they're not able to make a call. Then what? They need chat, right? It works on mobile and desktop. The biggest benefit here is just identifying this is probably most valuable for leads in a law firm. You might have an e-commerce business on the side where you sell sneakers. Fine. You know, chat's got a different use case there. For law firms, it's going to be leads, screening them, asking questions, and getting that booked appointment. It's really important that you also have a disclaimer upfront where you can say, look, you know, this is not legal advice. This doesn't constitute an attorney-client relationship. This is handled by bots or a virtual receptionist. Like, this is not the attorney talking, which we enable and which I encourage you to use. You'll find that for every 4 calls you get, if you think about your call volume the last few days, there's 1 new lead on chat for every 4 calls. So if that's not powerful enough for you to, you know, give it a try, I would say, if it's noisy, turn it off. If it's valuable, see how you can actually lean into that more and make sure that it matches your intake form, because it's basically a way to automate your intake form. There are some other tools that I include here, which you'll have in the slide deck, that I just like to include because they really complement well a lot of people who are managing employees, tracking their time, calendaring, et cetera, that is valuable no matter sort of what stage you're in your firm. And, you know, also consider like inbound and outbound workflows. So we've got chat, we're thinking multi-channel. We also are thinking about follow-up. But what often happens is those lead form fills, like, they don't get called back initially. So, you know, Cara, as you were mentioning, you already have an inbound lead, you had a call, you know, you can't get back in touch with them. You keep trying, and then you're finally able to. The same thing happens with your lead forms. So you have someone come in, how quickly are you following up? And then is that setting that 6-call cadence in motion, maybe with a text or email? You absolutely want to make sure that you are doing that, and just being mindful that, you know, if you're getting a form fill, that you have terms and conditions on your site that say you might email or text that person. All right. So what do you do next? I would encourage that you start keeping track of your time and identifying not only what you're spending time on that you can offload, but what you're spending time on that you haven't properly documented. Like, I'm on the phone and I'm asking these intake questions and I'm not using a form. I'm just pulling them out of my head because I've memorized them so well. Time to document it, because if you haven't documented it, you can't delegate it. And then identify things that you can fix immediately and keep an eye on those over the next, 3 to 6 weeks. And then keep making changes incrementally so you don't mix up the results from making too many changes at once. Hopefully, you will find that you are gaining more qualified clients, improving your marketing return on investment, improving your productivity and work-life balance, and extending your hours and capacity. And if you're interested in Smith AI helping you with this, doing it for you, we would be happy to. We are an omni-channel receptionist solution, and we really deliver consistent results for our clients with comprehensive services from screening and scheduling to intake and payments. And we're compatible with every solution that you have in your business, from VoIP phone systems to your website, with most CRM and case and practice management solutions, with Zapier, which connects us to many of them if we don't have a direct integration. And obviously most scheduling systems is an easy link. So if you would like to get started, we do also have a special offer for James Publishing. For anyone on this webinar who is not yet a Smith AI client, use the code James Publishing to get $100 off your first month. And I'm just going to zoom out for a second so that I can share with you a calendaring link and the link to our website. And if you have any questions, thanks, Jennifer, for saying Smith AI is awesome. And yes, we are English and Spanish for Sandra. So I'm happy to take any questions, but we would love to explore this conversation further with you directly.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Maddie. So couple questions that we didn't get to throughout the session. Julian asked, criminal defense specifically, do you have any recommendations on reducing shoppers? In other words, reducing those folks who are kind of coming, inquiring, and then, not serious, maybe not signing, not too serious about moving forward.
Yeah, I would ask them a question about, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this for you to resolve with an attorney or a law firm? I would also ask, what are the top 2 deciding factors for you? And if they haven't really been thinking about it seriously, they're not going to be able to come up with the deciding factors of whether or not they hire an attorney. And the other thing is, I would ask them, if you really get like a whiff of something you're not so keen on, have you worked with other attorneys, or have you talked to other attorneys? Because oftentimes those real red flag clients are the ones who have been fired or let go or not worked well with other law firms.
Excellent. Another good question. I'm a solo practitioner. I don't have a lot of time. What would be your top recommendation for me to implement?
The number one thing is calendaring. Make sure that it is added to your website, that there's a clear call to action, and that ideally you have the leads doing the calendaring themselves with your screening questions in there. I would obviously say, having a front line of Smith AI, is really valuable to make sure that you're not interrupted because you are so busy. But if you really dial in your intake questions and they're rigorous enough, you should be able to do a lot of screening that way, and then only be booked with people who are sincere and worth, your limited time. And I just linked to the slide deck.
Oh, nice.
Google Doc link. That's what that
Perfect.
is.
Perfect. Yeah. And Maddie, truthfully, we cannot recommend Smith.ai enough, especially for the solo practitioner. That's where you don't have the time. If you're the one trying to answer the phones and juggling all of this, really reach out. This is a great offer that they're presenting. We'll also include the link and the coupon code in the follow-up materials, which will include the recording and some other bonus pieces. So look out for that. Sandy asked about Spanish. Does your tool work? Oops, I'm missing it. Does tool work for Spanish clients? For some reason that keeps disappearing. Yeah, you talked about Spanish, right? Did we already? Yeah. Where did that question?
Awesome, Jennifer. Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. So, all right. I saw the question about how important is it to be accessible by phone versus contact forms and scheduling tools.
Yeah.
It's critical, but if you are in a position where you are super solo, low bank account balance, like scraping things together and really, really like way too busy is not even the right word for it. You are spread darn thin. Then you don't need Smith AI yet. You need like people to be screened automatically through a calendaring tool, figure out those questions, figure out who you're talking to, ask for referrals, even if they don't move forward with you, and say like, if you feel like we had a good conversation, even if you're not going to move forward, I'm trying to grow my business and I would really appreciate you referring me to others. I'll give you whatever if you're able to monetize it in your state. If not, don't offer them anything. But I would just say like, it's really important that you just focus your time on the time that you have where it's most valuable. Obviously, you know, answering the phone and having a receptionist is something I'm very passionate about. But the number one thing that's going to serve you, me as Maddie, not like with my Smith AI hat on, talking to a lot of attorneys, going to be that calendaring, because you have the screening embedded in that, and Calendly is free. So anyone can get a Gmail account, anyone can get a Calendly account. You can get a really cheap website and you can set that up in no time flat. And that's going to be the most immediate, most impactful thing you can do, the best bang for your buck.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said too that struck me is sort of, you know, screening and protecting that calendar, right? It's not just about putting that calendar link out there and, you know, not asking any of those qualifying questions. I mean, that is so important. And that is how you really protect that calendar and you attract those clients and the type of cases that you're looking to attract. So I think that is super important. I hear all the time from attorneys who say, yeah, you know, leads are coming in and I spend half my time sifting through the poor quality ones. So there's, you know, just implement some of these very simple basic steps with, you know, either free or super low cost software, and you will immediately see an impact. I can promise you that. So, all right. So I think we're a little bit past our time. If there are any more questions, I actually just dropped my schedule link in case anyone's interested in chatting with me as well. But feel free to reach out to Maddie, reach out to me. We love talking about this stuff. We'll hopefully partner again soon, and let us know if you have any questions. But it was a pleasure. Maddie, thank you so much for the time. Great stuff.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, everyone. Nice to see you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.